All right, we're going to take the painting that we started with in our last session, which is a black and white portrait with a light and shadow pattern, and we're going to add color to this. I have a limited palette of colors. I have a cadmium yellow, I have a yellow ochre, and a white. And then I have a green, which is it's a phthalo green. I have an ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson. I have a burnt umber and black. So that's my limited palette. You can use any colors. You just want to have, this is our cool side, and this is our warmer side over here. Our red today is going to be our alizarin crimson, because even though that's on the cool side, it does have a nice red content. So we'll use that to add to some of these warmer colors. So basically, I'm going to use ultramarine blue and some of my burnt umber and a little bit of alizarin crimson. I'm going to get some water on my brush so that this is a little bit smoother to move around. And I'm going to use that as my mixture to start working into my hair. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to paint on top of the hair that I had initially with some of this darker color. And I'm going to carry some of this into the light side as well, because I can always paint back into my shadow area with some of those lighter colors. So that's really going to be a darker part of my painting. I'm going to use some of this and increase the value of my background like I had before. And I'm going to go ahead and paint some of this in my background and enrichen it. Get a little bit more water so that I can spread this around. There we go. By the way, my black and white painting was done in our last session, which was a week ago. So it's been sitting and setting up. So for all intents and purposes, it's dry to the touch. And that's important for what I'm doing right now, because that means that the black and white is not going to interfere with the colors that I'm adding right now. Now I'm using alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue, and burnt umber as my dark. And sometimes people jump right into black, which is what we used in our underpainting. But now you can learn how to take some cool colors that aren't black and mix them together to make something that is similar, but has just a little bit more color to it. And sometimes black can be too much in terms of what it does to the painting. So we choose some alternative colors to make our black. All right, you can see that my paint just started dripping down because I had too much water on my brush. So I'm going to get my paper towel and wipe that up while I'm talking to you guys. All right, and I'm going to grab a little bit more of my ultramarine blue and my burnt umber and a little bit of my alizarin crimson. I'm going to make that darker value again, but this time I'm going to add a little yellow ochre to it. And that way I'm adding a warming color to my cool. And what it does is, instead of using white, which sometimes, again, just like the black color can be a little too much and it takes away, we're making something that's going to be just a little bit lighter that in essence will go into my hair, into some of those areas on the hair which represent the light area. There we go. And then I can carry some of this into the shadow if I want. So now I've got shadow and light side to my hair. I'm going to go back in with my very dark color with that ultramarine blue, burnt umber, alizarin crimson, because I think that just above the value that I just painted, It'd be nice if that was a little bit darker right up to the edge of that. And so what we're doing is we're playing around with values, allowing the dark on the side of the painting here in my background to resonate with the lighter value in the hair and to make it appear a little bit lighter. All right, so I'm going to take some of what I just mixed up, that darker color, and I'm just going to add a teeny bit of white to it. And I'll get that in there, and it's just going to gray it down just a teeny bit into that ultramarine blue, burnt umber, alizarin crimson mixture. And it'll just lighten it up, make a little bit of a gray, but it's more like a bluish purple gray with that touch of brown, which is our ultramarine blue. And so this really is nice in terms of just getting rid of what we had for the background. We're trying to cover every part of our painting with color. I'm running out of water on my brush. All right, that got a little light right there. So I picked up a little too much white on that pass. So remember, try and do all your mixing on your palette so that when you lay it up here, it's not going to affect the end result. And also everything else won't look as, it won't look as blended, if I may. All right, so there we go. We've got our background. And I'm just trying to adjust my camera so maybe we don't see as much of a reflection. There we go. That looks better. All right, we're getting into our face. So we're going to mix up for the shadow side. We're going to take some of that blue and some of that alizarin crimson, which is red. We're going to set it down here. And then we're going to add a little bit of that yellow ochre and a little bit of white. And we're going to take this color and we're going to mix it up so that it looks like a nice middle gray. And we're going to use that to define the gray in the shadow side of our face. So everything that had a shadow side already, we're painting over with sort of this bluish red gray that now has a touch of alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue, just a teeny bit of white. And what we're doing is we're just livening this up. Also, you know, those are cool colors, but as we add our yellow ochre, it gives it just a touch of the warmth. Carry this right down into the mouth. There we go. So it has just enough of a difference from what we had there and also from our background. And I'm going to carry some of this into the neck as well. So what this is doing is it's giving you a layer of color on top of the value that we had initially. just going to throw a little bit of value in here, up here on the edge of the ear. So pretty much all of my shadow has been covered over. And I'm going to do the same thing with the light. So I'm going to wash my brush out. And I'm going to start with the yellow ochre. And I'm going to add a little bit of the white to it. So yellow ochre, white, and then I'm going to get some of this alizarin crimson and bring that to the mix. But I'm going to use more white right now and then more of that alizarin crimson just so that I can get a little bit more of a reddishness to it. And that yellow ochre definitely gives it a little bit of a brown, but it's a warm brownish color. And speaking of that, I'm going to add a little bit of my burnt umber, which is right here, to the mix. So I don't want to get too light too soon. So I'm interested in covering up what I initially started with. And you can see it as I'm going over the eye. I am losing some of the detail of it. That's okay. We want to get rid of that underpainting. We want to bring this paint right up next to the dark color that we just put in, and then we can carve into it. There we go. So you can see that I'm trying to not worry so much about my brush strokes. So I'm keeping them light, but I'm also trying not to hang on to those really light values underneath. Get a little bit more water to loosen up my mixture. Paint this right up to the edge where that dark is. All right, so this is going to represent my light area. Now I'm going to take this mixture and I'm going to add a little bit more white to it. I already have that yellow ochre in there. By doing this a little bit more white, maybe just a tad of that alizarin crimson to give it a little bit more reddish hue. Now I can go ahead and hit this where I see some of the lights hitting the side of the nose and bottom and into the side plane. Same thing here with like just above the eyelid. Right here on the cheek. Coming down the side of the face. Right here under the nose, above the top lip, the bottom lip, leading into top of the chin, some of the ear. And of course, into the forehead. And then we'll carry some of this down into the shoulder area. And I'm going to take some of this and go across the clavicle. And I'll carry some of this up into the sternocleidomastoideus. And then with my yellow, I'm going to use a little bit of my yellow, my bright yellow. And I'll add that to the mixture so it'll intensify it a little bit, get a little bit more of that white. Grab a little bit of water. Now I'm mixing up a mixture on our 9-point value scale that's closer to white, but it's still probably like a number 3 in the scheme of things. And I'm just going to hit like above the brow here, maybe a little bit right there, a little bit right there. So this is more of like what I would say high key contrast. And I'm not trying to cover up what I just painted. What I'm trying to do is hit on top of it a little bit so that you start to notice some planes, so that you're building layers of value and you're allowing those layers to signify themselves and not get blended in. And I just keep going back to my palette and mixing. And remember, the way that this works is if you lay it and leave it rather than try and overwork it on your canvas. That's where you're going to have more luck. Now I'm going to go back into my dark value, so I'm going to wash my brush. I'm going to grab my alizarin crimson, my ultramarine blue, and I'm going to go back in and strengthen a little bit more of the shadow, get some burnt umber in there. And I'm going to grab a little bit of the light mixture because I know that there are places where if I can add this shadow value in, but keep it a teeny bit warmer, that's going to help. I'm going to take a little bit of this lighter mixture. So this one right here. So this is what we were using for the face. I'm going to add it to my ultramarine blue right in there so it lightens it up a little bit for a reflective light. So bring that on the side of the cheek. And also carry it down to the side of the neck. Then I can go back in with the darker mixture of the blue, ultramarine blue, and the red, and maybe a touch of that green. Haven't really been using the green up till now. Maybe just a little bit of the black. And I'm going to hit the side of the eyelid. Come into my eye. Into my nose, underneath the nose, down the side of the nose here. Some of that cast shadow into the lip. Give some core coming off the neck to the shadow here. And I need core on the cheek right here. And a little bit of dark into part of the ear. So I'm really trying to work that core up to the reflective light. And then what I'm going to do is take some white. So I'm cleaning my brush. I'm going to take some white and ultramarine blue, just those two. And I'm going to make a blue. It's going to have more of the darker color than it does the lighter. But I'm going to make a little bit of a lighter blue, and I'm going to bring it onto this background right up to the face. And that way, now it starts to separate itself from all the colors and values that I've been mixing. You can see it's not too light. I'm going to carry that over and right into that darker side and just kind of blend it in. And I can take a little bit of that blue and add it into my core. And I'm going to come down here into the neck here, and I added a little bit of white to what I'm using so that I can actually make a mixture that I could use over here just a little bit. It's got a little bit of a green in it. Because there's a little bit of shadow coming underneath. All right, I'm going to clean off my brush. And I'm just going to go in with some white and a little bit of alizarin crimson. So white and alizarin crimson, I'm mixing it together. I don't want it to be super, super light. So this is more of an intensity in color, but it's not as light. It's not like bright white. But what's nice about this is we can use that to just kind of hit some of these spots where we might have a little bit of red, like at the tip of the nose, on the lip. Might have a little bit of red in a cheek. Top of your ear sometimes has a little bit of red. All right, and I'm going to go to my the values that I was using in the light areas. So I'm going to get my white and my yellow, ochre, a little bit of my burnt umber. And I want to use that to go into the eye, the eyeball itself. If you remember, we were doing that the last time. All right, and the last thing I'm going to do is go into my alizarin crimson and my ultramarine blue. And just strengthen a little bit of the shadows that may need it as I'm painting back in. And maybe something got disturbed. And I am going to add a little bit of yellow ochre to some of my burnt umber. And we'll hit on some of these values that might be lightening up parts of our hair. Okay, and I'm going to lift up my phone just so you can see without reflections what's going on in here. If I bring it close, you can see some of the colors that are happening throughout. And if I come on this side, you can see how the reflections disappear in here so that you can see the reflective light, background, the darkness of the core, and then we have 3 or 4 layers of colors on the skin, even some green down in here. Then in the hair, see how we did the darker value here. This is the shadow on the forehead. And then we have the darker value underneath. When I hit those little lighter strokes and you pull it back, you can see how that really starts to resonate with the look of the paint. So there you go, just kind of coming on the side here so you can see it. And we will end our recording.